and welcome to Categories Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.categories.com. My name is Jason J. Rock Houston. We're speaking with Zappa Band Guitarist Mike Keneally. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great now. In prepping for the interview today, I was reading up a little on you, and I discovered that you started real early on in your musical career, as far as you first started playing music at age of 7. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, did you come from a musical family, or?
I was a musical family in the sense that music was in the house. I didn't have any other musicians in the house, although my dad had a really beautiful singing voice, and apparently was when he got out of the army in World War II, he was offered a job singing with a big band, but he chose not to do that. I remember hearing that at some point when I was growing up and being pretty astonished by that. But he had a lovely singing voice, and strangely enough, could whistle like virtuosically. He was a really good whistler.
Yeah.
But the main sort of music that was in the house that really had an effect on me when I was super young, which was in the 60s, was the Beatles, because I had a teenage sister who was just exactly the right age to be the target demographic for the Beatles. And so those records were playing in the house all the time.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when I was 7, I got this organ for my 7th birthday, and I didn't even know that I wanted to be a musician, but somehow my parents kind of figured out that this was going to be a likely interest for me, and they were right. I was like, the moment I laid eyes on that organ, I said yes. I walked up to it and started playing melodies right away, and absolutely connected with it. So
oh wow.
I credit my parents for understanding that music was the thing that I was supposed to be doing. I knew that I loved the Beatles. I knew that I was playing my sister's records whenever she wasn't in the house. And then at the point that the Beatles started to get quote unquote too weird for her, she just gave me all of her Beatles stuff. So the Beatles posters that used to be in her room packed up in my room, and I just became obsessive about them, and that was like the first music that really had a major impact and a major influence on me. And then when I got this organ, I was done for. Music was it. That was my path for life at that point.
Oh wow, and who's not influenced by the Beatles? It doesn't seem like it matters a person's age. I mean, I think the one thing we'll all agree, besides great musicians, they were great songwriters. I mean, I got that album, the number ones. I mean, it's like a collection of 27 number one hits. So for any band to have one number one hit, it is quite remarkable. But 27, I mean, come on,
Yeah, well, they were more than a band. There's never been a phenomenon to match that, really.
Yeah.
And I, from this remove, coming up on 60 years later from when they really made an impact in this country, they just they were cataclysmic, the effect that they had on culture. So they were unavoidable, and it was just it was fortunate that something that was that powerful and that popular was also that good,
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other band that's maybe had as big of an impact on people that's also just celebrating their 60th anniversary is The Who. Interesting, both British pop bands. So I don't know what it is about the bands that came out of England at the time, but great songwriting.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you could say the same for the Stones.
Oh yeah.
But really, in terms of a wide-ranging impact on all aspects of culture and all different age groups, there's nothing that can compare to the Beatles, and it's ongoing.
Yeah.
And there's still something really rewarding about digging into their records and analyzing them lately with the new mixes that have been coming out, and stuff like this Get Back series, which just felt like a total gift, to be able to spend 8 hours hanging out with the Beatles. It feels like something you never thought you'd have the opportunity to have. So it's, for me anyway, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are just over it. It's like, okay, enough Beatles, thanks, boomer.
Yeah.
But for me, I can't get enough.
And kind of just to further that point, a lot of people listening to this probably think Motley Crue wrote Helter Skelter. No, folks, that was a Beatles tune. And an interesting thing about that is, like you said, they did a little bit of everything, and that's probably as metal as the Beatles ever got. But yet, it struck a chord with people because it was so different at the time.
Funny you should mention the Who, because the Who were indirectly responsible for Helter Skelter. That was Paul wrote that song because he read a Pete Townsend interview talking about how he had just put out the heaviest song, which I think was probably I Can See for Miles.
Oh yeah,
so, Paul hadn't even heard the song yet. He just read the interview and he was like, mate, I'll show you. And that's where Helter Skelter came from.
Interesting. And now another thing is, you are one of these guys who is a true musician because, well, you're known for your guitar playing. Truth be told, you play the keys, keyboards, you play the bass, you play the guitar, you write your own songs. You quite an accomplished musician. So, of all those things you do, I mean, do you think of yourself primarily as a guitar player, or does it kind of just depend on what you're doing at the time?
Well, I'm really grateful to be able to do both. There's part of me that will probably always consider myself to be keyboardist first, because that was my first instrument.
Okay.
I started keyboard when I was 7. I started guitar when I was 11. So just in terms of the numbers, keyboard's got a little bit of an edge. But there's something about a guitar that is expressive in a way that a keyboard isn't, especially like an organ or a piano that you can't bend notes on, whereas on a guitar you have like expressive capabilities, which you can do on a synthesizer. But for some reason, when you bend a pitch on a synthesizer or you do modulation on a synthesizer, to me it always sounds like you're just trying to sound like a guitar player. So, this doesn't mean I don't do it.
Yeah.
If I bend a pitch on a synthesizer, but I think that there's something about the way it's possible to express yourself on a guitar that brings out more of your for want of a better term, your inner soul. Like when I do pitch bends on a synthesizer, there's always a part of me that goes, yeah, that sounds like Chick Corea. Yeah, there's Jan Hammer there.
Wow.
Whereas if I do it on a guitar, it feels more like me.
Okay.
So I think it might be that I consider myself, and I'm probably more technically accomplished on a keyboard just because of the nature of the beast. Like you can execute really, really complicated stuff on a keyboard super crisply because all you have to do is push down a key. That's what all the mechanism requires of you. Whereas on a guitar, you have to have both of your hands working in tandem. You need to fret the note just so with your left hand. You need to articulate the note just so with your right hand. Both hands need to be in concert at that moment, working in perfect unison. So there's more opportunities for things to go wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm such an instinctive musician, even after
all these years,
nearly 50 years now playing the guitar. I still I'm always going for things that I've never done before. That's when I'm on stage. That's my primary goal. I want to play something I've never heard before, much less played before. So I'm always reaching for something just slightly beyond my experience as a player, which means it's not always going to be exactly perfect. But that was the same deal with Frank.
Yeah.
Frank always said, if I launch into a guitar solo in concert, be aware that you're not seeing a guy who's just trotting out a bunch of licks that I've prepared. I'm attempting to make a composition. That's what he was above all, was a composer. It's just that the tools of his composition was changing all the time. Sometimes it was paper, sometimes it was computer, sometimes it was a bunch of guys that he was pointing at and making them create a piece of music spontaneously on the spot, and sometimes it was a guitar where he was like creating an instantaneous, spontaneous composition for the audience and for himself.
And as far as Frank Zappa, I was also reading before you ever worked with the man that you were a huge fan of his music. So I would love to talk to you about that. I mean, as far as what was the Frank Zappa album or song that really got hooked you, that got you into the music?
It was sort of like it was kind of a 1, 2, 3 punch. Because when I was 8 years old, I used to go into this record store called Soundsville, and they had a Frank Zappa poster up in the back that used to terrify me. And there was something about the combination of his face and his name that I found very unsettling, and at the same time completely fascinating. I remember I would go back there and look at this poster, sort of dare myself to look at it, because you had to flip through a group of posters to get to it, and I would always be nervous as I knew I was approaching the Zappa poster, and then I would get there and it was like a little shock, and I would look at it and go, what is the deal with this guy? And then a little bit after that, because I had very cool parents who would let me stay up late. And the Mothers of Invention were on the Dick Cavett show.
Wow.
Very erudite late night talk show host back when it was okay to be smart, and he would and he had the Mothers on, and I remember thinking, oh, I'm finally going to hear what these guys sound like. I bet it's going to be really ugly and scary. And the first song they played was the song called Sofa, which was a really pretty waltz. And I thought, what? It completely subverted my expectations. That was an important lesson about not judging a book by the cover. And so that was thing one. Shortly thereafter, the guy across the street was a kid named Eric McGrew, and he was like 3 years older than me, so it was already kind of surprising that he was even talking to me.
Wow.
But I remember he specifically said, you're weird, and I think I have a song that you need to hear. I think you're really going to like this. I was like, oh, okay. So I went across the street, and he played me the song Help, I'm a Rock from the album Freak Out by the Mothers of Invention, which is the first Frank Zappa album. And I couldn't believe my ears. I didn't know that you were allowed to make music this freaky and put it on a record. And it was, I felt like this is my music. I remember hearing that and thinking, I didn't know this was possible. I didn't know this existed, but I feel completely at home with this. And I acquired that album from him in a trade. I can't even remember what I traded.
Wow.
It didn't matter. Here, I'll give you half my blood. It didn't matter. It's just like, I need this album. And that had a huge impact on me. And then a year later or so, there was a guy, we used to have these yard monitors, guys in the playground at school who were in charge of making sure that we didn't kill each other in the playground. And he was like this very, I could tell he was kind of a counterculture kid.
Yeah.
And he wasn't somebody who necessarily had a bunch of pals either, like me. It's like, because we were into weird stuff. We weren't.
It was the music that brought you two guys together. How cool is that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he started wanting, we started talking because he noticed that I wasn't playing with the other kids during recess. I was hanging out by myself a lot of the time. And he said, all right, what are you into? And I'm like, well, I really like music. And he goes, really? It's like, so he was an older kid, and he started bringing records to school that he would lend to me. And one day he brought in We're Only in It for the Money by the Mothers of Invention.
Wow.
And I took that album home, and I absorbed that album into my DNA. That album, which is still my favorite Frank Zappa album, is an absolute masterwork. There's nothing else like it. And at that point, I was completely in. I was 100% wholeheartedly in, and I wanted to have every Zappa album, and I became obsessed at that point. And I guess I was. I think I was 11 at that point.
And talking to you, Mike, I just love the enthusiasm as you talk about the Frank Zappa and his music. And I got to say this, that before we go any further in the interview, I don't know if people even realize, besides just his own music, the huge impact Frank Zappa had on music in general. I mean, if you go all the way back to, I believe the song is "Smoke on the Water" by Deep Purple. You mentioned Mothers of Invention. I mean, they're mentioned in that Deep Purple song. Frank Zappa, he's the one that gave Alice Cooper his first record deal. I mean, we might not have Alice Cooper if it had not been for Frank Zappa.
We might not have Sgt. Pepper if it hadn't been for Frank Zappa. Paul McCartney has been quoted as saying that the Beatles were, expressly trying to make their Freak Out album.
Wow.
Which and if you listen to a song like Lovely Rita on Sgt. Pepper, it sounds like some of the songs on Freak Out with the weird heavy breathing and some of the strange noises and stuff.
Yeah.
Frank was when he put out his 60s albums, that stuff just got in the water supply, and you'll notice that at that point The Stones got freakier.
Yeah.
The Who got freakier. A lot of bands came out starting to do much freakier stuff. Jefferson Airplane. It's like Frank.
The list goes on and on. Yeah.
A major impact on popular music. So whether anybody heard a Zappa album or not, they were receiving the results of his influence on all these other bands.
And I very much like yourself. I dare say there's never been another musician like Frank Zappa, since or before. I mean, I think that's why he had such an interesting fan base, because there's really nothing like that out there at the time. And another thing I was reading is, so you go from kind of being a fan of this music to actually meeting the man and getting the opportunity to audition for his band. And at that point, you made contact with Zappa and you tell him, hey, look, I know all your stuff. And he told you, a couple songs that he wanted you to learn. And you went down there and you knew it all, basically, is what I read.
Well, it was, I was really obsessive about it when I was growing up, and I listened to this stuff nonstop, and the way I described it is that there was like a Zappa jukebox in my head. Yeah. So when I had that opportunity to play for him, I really did my best to seize it. That was my dream. My dream was to play with him, and then all of a sudden I'm in the room, and he's saying, "Well, play this." So he would say a song, and if it wasn't a song I'd already taught myself how to play, I would press the button in the jukebox in my head and just like play along with it,
Yeah.
And so he found that very useful, because he wanted to like bring back some older songs into the repertoire that he hadn't played in a while.
Yeah.
So I was a resource that he could rely on to bring back some of these older tunes, which was great. I was incredibly grateful and delighted to be of service to him in that way, because it meant that on that tour in 1988, it helped us to have a more varied set list, and we brought back a song like "Who Needs the Peace Corps," which just happened to be on that album "We're Only in It for the Money" that kid gave me in the playground.
Wow!
And so that was like an amazing full circle thing for me. I remember one day where Frank just said, "I think I'd like to try Who Needs the Peace Corps," and then he just turned around and looked at me and waited for me to start playing it, and so from my recollection of this song, we were able to pull together an arrangement for a 12-piece band. So I was grateful to be able to provide that service, and at the same time, I was in absolute disbelief that I was there at all, because I was a fan. First and foremost.
I mean, see, that's the thing, Mike. A lot of guys like you, they have a dream of growing up and being a successful musician, but not many guys live out the dream of, okay, this is this is what I influenced, and now I'm sharing the stage with this guy that influenced me.
It was mind-boggling and almost unsettling, because once it turned out that Frank wasn't able to tour anymore.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, what do I do for a follow-up? I started my career with the dream coming true. Yeah. Where do I go now? And I ended up playing with his kids Amit and Dweezil for a long time in a band called Z, and so because I wanted so much. Well, first of all, that was an amazing band. Dweezil is an incredible guitar player, and Amit is an unbelievable frontman. The way he performs on stage, I'm convinced that Jack Black saw Amit on stage at some point, because some of the movements that I would see Jack Black do on stage, I had seen Amit do on stage with me years before, and he's just an entertainer, a complete entertainer, and the combination of Amit and Dweezil together was just like magical in some of those shows. And so I loved that band Z, but I was also really reluctant to leave the Zappa orbit, because it's like I got the taste for it. It was like I was like a junkie, and so I got in Frank's band, and that's where I started my career.
Wow!
And so, okay, how do I follow that up? What can I do? And I realized after a time, the only way I can really move this forward in a way that's meaningful is to start making my own albums, and to use the influence of Frank, hopefully not in a way that is just like imitating him, which was hard not to do in the beginning. And if you listen to my first couple of records, the Zappa influence is real strong and real obvious. But over time, it's just to be inspired by what he created, the energy that he created as a band leader, as a force, and to try to apply that to my own music. So as time has gone on and I've continued making albums, it's like his influence remains strong, even if the albums don't sound like him. You know what I mean?
I mean, and you've had a very successful solo career, so it's not like you're just some flash in the pan musician. And I think anybody that's played with Frank Zappa has got to be a certain caliber of musician. I mean, I know another cat you played with over the years was Steve Vai, who was also in Zappa's band. You know, and he's a very unique guitar player. What I love about listening to his music, he's one of those guys that can shred with the best of them, but listen what the stuff he did with Frank Zappa when he was in his band. Look at what he did with the David Lee Roth band. Look at what he did with, on his solo albums in particular. I mean, it's hard for, I think, anybody who's an instrumentalist like Steve Vai to actually, do a full-blown concert or do an album where you're able to keep somebody's attention with instrumental music. But, he's a different type of player, if you know what I mean, and it seems to work because he is so different at what he does.
He's a beautiful composer,
Yeah.
He's another one who just happens to use the guitar as a tool to deliver these compositions, but he also happens to be a completely, technically unbelievable guitar player, really inspiring. So when I got in his band, it was almost a joke because his if you look at his fingers, they're like an inch and a half longer than mine, and I had to play his stuff in unison with him or in harmony with him, and at that point it just becomes refusal to fail. It's a mind over matter exercise to make your fingers do that stuff. Anything close to the same way that he does it. Playing with, I've said this in the past, but playing with Steve Vai was like the best guitar lessons I ever got paid to take.
And he's really he's been doing it for so long. He's really kind of one of those guys that he put out a great new album recently, but it took him a while to get it out because he had to have his surgery. He was suffering something with his hand, and but he did whatever he had to do, and he's recovered. And he's able to still play. So you got to respect.
He specifically wrote one composition for one-handed guitar. It's an absolutely amazing song. It's funny. He actually the album that I'm working on right now. He was kind enough to guest on one of the songs. He plays these two amazing solos on one of the songs on my record that's coming out this year.
I can't wait to hear that.
I've been sending people the files for the new album just to get their feedback on it, and people keep coming back saying, dude, those solos on that one song are unbelievable. And I'm going, yep, that's fine. I agree with you.
I can't wait to hear that. Now, Mike, I'm glad we're able to talk a little bit about your backstory so people can listen to this and kind of know a little bit about who you are. But when Frank got real sick, I mean, did it kind of all of a sudden just come on, or did you guys know he was sick for a while?
Yeah, he had told us. I remember he was informing each of the people, the musician in his bands that he was in touch with, separately. And he invited me to come to the house to listen to some music that he was working on. This was in 1990. Yeah. And when we were there listening to the music, that's when he told me, very almost theatrically, that he had just been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and then he sat back and took a huge drag on his cigarette.
Wow.
And so that was obviously extremely upsetting. And then it was a little over 3 years after receiving that information that he passed away. It was so sad, obviously.
I bet.
It was, I felt, it was obviously tragic for the world to lose him, but it also just hurt me because I felt like I had just barely gotten the opportunity to spend time with him and know him. It was,
and he goes, I imagine that's really interesting about this story that we're talking about today, Mike, because he goes from being your musical hero to not just your bandmate, but your friend. And, that's not a story a lot of people have. I mean, like you said, to many people around the world, Frank Zappa was a musical, hero, but much more than that to you. I mean, because he actually became a friend, somebody you actually knew.
Well, it's interesting. If you were to ask him about that, he always claimed that he wasn't friends with the people in his band.
Oh, wow.
He always had he was very clear about his employer-employee relationship.
I got you. Okay.
But having said that, he would say, yeah, come on up to the house and listen to what I'm working on. And it wasn't like we were just like sitting there playing Monopoly or something. He got something out of that relationship because he would watch people listening to his music and watch their responses, and that would give him some input on changes that he wanted to make in the music. He wanted to see how people responded to the stuff. But we definitely had a relationship that I would consider his presence in my life as being very warm, and he was very kind to me and very generous with his comments. Like I was able to give him a copy of my first solo album, which was called Hat was the name of the album, and I was nervous, partly because I knew that he was a big influence on it, and I was afraid that he would just listen to the album and think that, oh, this is just this kid trying to be like a miniature me. But he saw past that aspect of it, and after I went to his house, as soon as I got to the house, there was a guy that was working there named Dave Dondorf, and he goes, "Man, you should know, Frank heard your record and he really liked it." I go, "Wow, really?" So, if the fact that he was telling this to other people, that meant something. And then when I got in the room where he was, he made sure he practically stood me still so he could look me in the eyes and say, "Your record is great."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh, wow."
I mean, that's the ultimate stamp of approval right there. And
I was like, if my career was forced to end in that moment, I would have been satisfied.
I bet, and Mike, I could talk to you all day, but I know you're busy. But before we end this, because like I said, I felt it was really important to kind of get your backstory out so people know who Mike Keneally is. But we're talking to you today because the Zappa Band is going back out on tour. And so my question is, talk a little bit about how this came about. I mean, whose decision was it for you guys to go back out? Is any chance we'll get a record or a DVD or something down the line, or is this a one-time deal?
No, I mean, this is something we're really interested in doing for as long as we can manage it. It was put together. The band was formed initially as a result of Amit's creation of this tour called The Bizarre World of Frank Zappa, which was early 2019, and some people may remember it was the Hologram tour. Although it's like for people who actually came out to see the show, they would discover that it was much more than just the hologram, which was this digital simulation of Frank that was. I mean,
they did the same thing for Ronnie Dio, so I mean, other artists have done that.
In fact, it was the same company that did it. It was a company called Illusion that Amit sits on the board of this company, so he was very heavily involved with the technology of it. And so, but as for people who just thought that it was going to, because a lot of people hear the word hologram and they were horrified and they ran in the other direction. But for people who came out to see the show, they realized that aspect of it, the hologram aspect of it, was just a percentage of the evening. It was, I think, 5 songs that had the Zappa hologram, and the rest of the time it was all kinds of different visuals, all sorts of animations, all sorts of different immersive experiences that over the course of the evening really turned into a very, very moving experience. And I had friends who came out that were very skeptical, and they said, this was like phenomenal. This was an amazing thing. So it was a powerful thing to be a part of, especially because part of the night we were accompanying Frank's own performances. So we would hear these improvised guitar solos of Frank, and even though obviously it was the same solo every night, it felt different every time. It was as though Frank was there and we were accompanying him. And
interesting.
It really felt like a spontaneous experience every night. So it was very moving for us. But it was also technologically a very involved performance, and very expensive to move around from town to town. So when that tour was done, there was a feeling amongst the band certainly that we didn't want to stop. We wanted to continue playing shows, and so we started booking shows at this jazz club in Los Angeles called the Big Potato that we were all.
Oh, okay, I've heard of them. Yeah.
I played there with my own band all the time, so we started booking gigs there, and Amit came out to see us, and he realized that there was a life for this band, not necessarily just connected to the Bizarre World of Frank Zappa tour, but just to go out. And he said, well, I think we should just call you the Zappa Band.
Yeah.
And the officially sanctioned Zappa Trust approved Zappa group, and you go out there and spread the word about Frank's music. Just continue getting out there in front of people, and then the pandemic hit.
Oh wow!
We didn't do any shows for 2 years, and last year we had the opportunity to go out on the road opening for King Crimson.
Wow!
What turned out to be their final, what's likely to be their final tour, at least in the United States. So we had the privilege of going out in front of the Crimson audiences, which is a very discerning audience, a very music focused audience.
And I could see King Crimson fans being very accepting to this type of music,
Extremely accepting, and also the band itself were extremely accepting. It's like it was kind of a magical double bill, and an amazing experience to go out and do those shows. So once
Mike,
that was done,
I think this is a beautiful way to pay tribute to Frank Zappa's legacy, and because he's been gone now, for over 30 years, and it's great that you guys are still out there playing the music, because that way there's no chance anybody's ever going to forget about Frank Zappa.
Well, I'm very excited about the tour that we're doing in June, because it'll be the first time that we're going out on the road as a headline act. So it's like, even for the Crimson tour, we had to keep things really tight. It was 45 minutes every night. So due to the fact that we had these time constraints, we were playing the same songs every night. We won't have our hands tied that way when we're doing our own tour. We can be a lot more relaxed about it. We'll change up the songs from night to night, because a big part of the experience back in the day of going to see Zappa, a lot of guys, especially on the East Coast, were going to see multiple shows because they knew they were going to get different experience every night. It was always going to be a bit unpredictable that way. So we want to deliver the same thing in June when we do these shows. So if people do want to, take the journey with us and see multiple shows, they're going to get different experiences. That's very important to us.
As far as the other guys in the band, these are all musicians that played with Frank throughout his career, right?
Mostly. We've got 4 guys in the band who played with Frank. Ray White on vocals and guitar, and Robert Martin on vocals and keyboards and saxophone, and Scott Tunis on bass, and myself, that all played in the band. But the other guys in the band have very strong connections to Frank. The drummer, who's Joe Travers, who also plays in my group, Beer for Dolphins.
Okay.
His day gig is as what's called the Vault Meister for the Zappas, which means his job to go through the thousands of unreleased tapes in Frank Zappa's tape vault and restore this music for release for the first time. So in the last few years, there's been this constant stream of amazing archival Zappa releases that Joe is in charge of.
Wow.
And then we have another guitar player named Jamie Kime, who was in Dweezil's band Zappa Plays Zappa for a while back in the 90s, or in the 2000s, I should say. And he's a phenomenal guitar player, and having him in the band frees me up to play a lot more keyboard. So I'm splitting my time pretty equally between guitar and keys, and we're able to do very elaborate, intricate arrangements that cover a lot of the crazy orchestrations that Frank used to do for marimba and the vibraphone and trombone and all these different instruments. Even though we're just working with guitars and keyboards and bass and drums, between me and Robert on keyboards, we're covering a lot of these different orchestrations that Frank used to do. So then I'll take my hands off the keyboard and just shred on guitar for a while. We're covering a lot of ground musically and orchestrationally, and then Robert and Ray's voices, considering how long they've been doing this, such power. They're both such tremendous, just explosive vocalists, and their voices sound incredible when they sing together. It's just like it gets you right in the chest bone, in terms of the type of material we're doing, we're really covering a wide range, from the most crazy, intricate instrumental pieces to very powerful, just like rock vocal pieces, and we're running the gamut over the course of the evening, so that you'll get a very comprehensive, satisfying Zappa experience.
Wow.
People who have seen, like we just got done playing on this cruise, which is where I got COVID last week.
Oh wow!
And the response to people from people to this music is so strong. It's strong from people who had the opportunity to see Frank while he was alive, and it's also strong from people who never got the opportunity to see Frank.
Because I was just going to say, that's the thing about a project like this, is as many people that heard this music first time around, there may be people reading about the Zappa band now, know nothing about Frank Zappa, discovering the music for the first time, and then they might go back and listen to those original records, which is cool about something like this, because it's continuing to put the music out there.
It really is. It's powerful, and especially these gigs that we're about to do, which some intimate venues. So if you're in a small space with musicians playing this music at a certain level, it's a powerful experience that you can't turn away from. It's going to have an effect on you. Mm-hmm. And for somebody who's never been in the room with this music before, it sinks in deep. So I'm looking forward to really reaching people that way.
Final question for today, Mike. I was curious. So I know a lot of people aren't buying CDs these days, but I'm still a music fan. I'm old school. Love to have physical. Have you guys, besides doing these live dates, any talk about maybe doing a CD, even like recording a show or a live DVD or something like that for people to?
A lot of the music, a lot of the shows that we did last year when we were opening for Crimson are actually available online.
Oh, cool. Okay.
There's a service called Quobuzz, which is spelled Qobuz, and if you go to Quobuzz and search the Zappa Band, you'll find something like 10 or 12 concerts that we played last year opening for Crimson. So people can hear that already.
Oh, cool.
But we have discussed going into the studio and making an album. The issue is just making the time. I figured out last night when I was looking at my schedule, and that I'm playing with I think 8 different bands right now.
Wow.
So it's and every one of these bands requires a certain amount of time. So there's
that. Yeah.
There's just the scheduling challenge that needs to be worked out. But there's a desire on the part of the Zappa Trust as well to make a Zappa Band album.
I think that would be ultimate tribute, to Frank Zappa and his music, and to kind of for you guys, since you're out there doing it, kind of really put your version out there. Or something like put your stamp all over it.
It would be nice to begin that process, and of course, obviously, the repertoire is just so vast. And, and there's also some unreleased pieces. Songs that Frank himself never even put out that we would love to have the opportunity to put down recorded versions of.
Have you ever heard the song called Black Tongue? It's a song Gene Simmons from Kiss put out that he discovered years later that featured Frank. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think Dweezil had a big hand in that, in supplying Gene with the vocals, with that material, and
cool.
it's really something. In fact, one of the nights that I went to the Zappa house, towards the end of Frank's life, he started hosting these Friday night soirees, he called them, where he would just invite a bunch of people, a bunch of friends. And one night I walked there and Gene Simmons is there on the couch, hanging out with Frank. You just never knew who you were going to see when you showed up. Yeah. So Frank and Gene were obviously enjoying each other's company. They were pals.
Yeah. Oh, cool. And final question, as far as where people can follow you, is there an official Zappa Band website or anything like that?
Yeah, if you go to the zappaband.com, it's actually a direct link to the Zappa Band Facebook page, where you can keep up to date on whatever performances we've got coming up, and they're always just like keeping track of like anniversary dates of specific albums and stuff that. It's just like a celebration of Frank, but it's also a good place to go to find out what the Zappa band are up to.
Well, that's what we want to do, and I posted some of the tour dates on my site, and I want to thank you, Mike, for taking time to talk to me today. I really enjoyed it, and I just want to say before I let you go, the interview will be going up probably about a week or two. I will be sure to let Chip know, but I also want to say, you mentioned that you're working on a new solo album. If you're happy with the way the interview went today, let's keep in touch. I'll hit you up on Facebook, and when you're ready to drop that or anything else you're involved with, let me know, and I'd love to talk to you again.
I very much appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Okay, take care, my friend. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
You do the same, Jason. Thanks so much.
Chaotic Riff Magazine.